Good day and welcome to lesson 14 in our study of the book of Mark. Today we're going to finish chapter 4, the last few verses. So I want to read these verses first to sort of set the stage. On the same day when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us cross over to the other side." Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was. And other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, "Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" This is a very famous story in the Bible about Jesus calming the wind and the sea. And this really is what we tend to get out of this, is the fact that Jesus was able to calm the winds and to calm the sea. But there's so much more hidden in this that we should look at. First of all, this is the same day that Jesus was teaching. He had been teaching all day to multitudes of people. He was in a boat, so he could be separated from the multitudes who were still on land, and he was teaching them all day, and he was obviously tired. He was a human being at this time, and it was obviously getting to him a little bit. So when evening had come, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to the other side. Let us cross over to the other side." And so they started away. When this happened, they left the multitude. They took him along in the boat as he was. He didn't go home to get more clothes or get extra blankets or anything. He just came as he was, as he had been dressed, as he had been for that day. They just got him, they just started the boat, and they started rowing to the other side. Now the Sea of Galilee is about 13 miles long and about 7 or 8 miles wide, and it was felt to be about 5 miles wide at this particular part. That's quite a distance. The Sea of Galilee is also the lowest freshwater lake in the world. It's about 600 feet below sea level, 600 to 700 feet, and it's surrounded by mountains, from which much of the water of the lake tends to come. But because of the type of the winds and because of the type of the surrounding area, the Sea of Galilee is noted to have very sudden and very violent storms. So this was not something that was unheard of, to have a storm like this, but it was something that they had initially not actually prepared for, apparently, because they set out just as they were, without any extra preparations. "Let us cross over to the other side," and they had left the multitude. They took him along in the boat as he was. And other little boats came along with them. So this was a little flotilla of small craft heading towards the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now it says, "A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, though it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep in a pillow." Jesus was tired. This is about the only place in the Bible where it says that Jesus slept. Because in most places it says that Jesus does not slumber or sleep. It says in Psalm 121, verses 3 to 4, "He that keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will not slumber nor sleep." But in this context of the story, Jesus did have a nap. He was lying down asleep. The winds were howling, the sea was raging, and Jesus was asleep. He knew perfectly well what the outcome would be, but he was asleep. However, the disciples were not quite that calm. They were fearful. The storm was such that the waves were coming over the edge of the boat and filling the boat with water, so that the boat obviously was in danger of sinking. And they were fearful. And they were wondering why he could just sleep and let everything go on as it was, because they felt the boat was going to sink and they were going to drown. And they awoke him. The storm didn't waken him up. His disciples woke him up and said, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" In other words, they almost implied that he had no thought for their own safety. So there is the question here, because people often say, because Christ wanted me to do something, nothing will happen. Here is an example where the disciples did everything they were supposed to do. It was Jesus that made the decision to go to the other side, and the disciples did what he asked them to do. They went to the other side, and they still get into the storm. And life is like this. Life is like this all the time, where we think we're doing something that God wants us to do, or we think we're doing the right thing, and storms come into our lives. And sometimes these storms are severe. Sometimes a lot happens that we don't want to happen, or we don't like to have happen, but it happens anyway. Even those of us who feel we know God and who know that God is on our side. So the disciples were fearful. They were upset. They were afraid. Here was Jesus asleep in the stern of the boat with apparently not a care in the world. So they awoke him. The storm didn't wake him up. The wind didn't wake him up. The sea crashing against the boat didn't wake him up. But the disciples did. And then he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." So there are two things here. He rebuked. The word that's used in Hebrew for this is the same word that's used when Jesus drove out demons. He rebuked the wind. He just didn't order it. He just actually rebuked it, as if there were demons controlling the wind and the sea. So Jesus rebuked the wind and said to be still, and cast into the sea, "Be still." And the wind ceased, and the sea became calm, a great calm. Now, you know that in a storm, even after the wind is abate, the seas remain restless and quite turbulent for a period of time. So there's two miracles here. One is the fact that he asked the wind to cease, which it did. And then he asked the sea to be still, which it was almost instantly. There was a great calm after Jesus said, "Peace, be still." But then he rebuked not only the wind and not only the sea, but he also rebuked the disciples, for he said, "Why are you so fearful? Why do you have such little faith?" These disciples who had been with Jesus now for at least a period of time, they had been with him for the day, they had seen him cast out demons, they had seen him heal the sick, they had seen him do a number of miracles. They had listened to his teachings about the parables, they had listened to what he could do, what he had said, and yet they still seemed to have no understanding of what he was capable of and how he would protect them. And this is just like us. We go through so many things in life, and when trials and tribulations hit us, we seem to lose our faith. We seem to think that Jesus has abandoned us, that we have no help, that no one is standing by us. And this is exactly what the disciples felt, that Jesus had abandoned them, that he was asleep, that they were going to perish, and all they had to do was wake him up. But they said, he said to the disciples, "Well, why do you have such little faith? Why do you not believe?" He could ask us many times the same question. The most interesting thing then is that the disciples then feared exceedingly. They were afraid with the waves and the wind and the storm, and they were afraid that the boat might sink. But after Jesus calmed the wind and calmed the sea, they were even more afraid because they had seen the actual power that Jesus had. And they were even more afraid of the situation. They were exceedingly fearful and questioned, who can this be that even the wind and the sea obey him? Well, we know who he is, who he was. But the point of this is that even if you do what Christ wants you to do, even if you do what you believe to be Christ's mind for you, it doesn't mean you'll be free of troubles. It says in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12, all who desire to live godly lives in Jesus will suffer persecution. There will be storms come into our lives, come into your lives. Even if you do what Jesus wants you to do, there will be storms. Severe storms. Storms that may make you think that you're going to perish, that the boat you're in, so to speak, is going to sink. Even if you do what Christ wants you to do. But the point is, make sure Christ is in your boat. Because when you call on him, he will help to allay your fears and the fear and the storm that's pounding you. You see, Jesus said, let us go to the other side before all the storm developed. But even though people were doing what he wanted them to do, they still got in the midst of the storm, they still had the midst of the trouble, the trial, the difficulty, to the point that they feared for their lives. But Jesus was in the boat with them. And he's the one that said, wind and sea, be calm. So, there's a reason for everything. There are reasons why we may be persecuted. It helps us. It helps us build character. It helps us build peace. And helps us build faith that Christ can be there for us. Is there a purpose for the storms in our lives? It may be just to do that, to build up character and to help us know that Christ never leaves us, that he's always there. You see, this was the whole story. The boat was going to the other side. It wasn't just that Jesus calmed the wind and the sea. It was because it's to show that he's with us. And even doing what he wants us to do, we can still engage and encounter storms and tribulations and trials. But as long as Christ is with us, we are safe. And as it says in the first verse of chapter 5, then they came to the other side. So this is the story of the wind and the wave being calmed by Christ, but it's also a story of having faith, and of the fact that even though we follow along with him, there will be storms and tribulations and difficulties in our lives. But why do we fear? Do we have little faith? He is with us. So we should accept what he can do, know what he can do, and appreciate the fact that with us, we will get to the other side. So that's the end of chapter 4, and we'll start chapter 5, the first number of verses in that chapter, next week. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.